Good afternoon and good morning, everybody. Welcome to this LinkedIn Live hosted by Arpeggio. My name is Jette, and I am a senior account manager here at Arpeggio, responsible for all our private equity-backed clients. Hence, the subject for today's LinkedIn Live around the sales optimization in private equity-backed companies. So today we have a panel of absolute sales experts within the private equity space who will touch upon three subjects that we've chosen for today. And those are how to use data in sales, how to implement sales methodologies, but also how to drive the necessary change management processes within the sales organizations. And for such questions, we of course need an expert panel, which we have here today. So I would like everyone to briefly introduce themselves and both your relation to sales and also private equity. So maybe Scott, maybe we can start with you.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Hope everyone's having a fantastic day so far. My name is Scott Kaplan. I'm the founder and chief coach of a sales consulting company called Quick Hit Sales Tips. I spent many years at a private equity company on the operations team, helping the portfolio. So from anywhere from due diligence all the way through helping the portfolio grow all the way through exit. And then now as a owner in a sales consulting company, a vast majority of my customers are private equity or companies that are private equity backed. So real familiar with the space, the speed, and the focus that private equity brings to an organization. So look forward to talking with you all today.
Perfect. Thank you, Scott. And Simon?
Thank you, Jeppe. Hello, everybody. My name is Simon Rojo. I work as an account executive in Salesforce, and for the last 2 years, I have been working with PE-backed companies and also how they are going to optimize the sales process within a CM system.
Good. And James, you could probably guess who's next.
Yeah, absolutely. So good morning, good afternoon, everyone. James Halley. I'm the Vice President of Sales here at Sitel, which is a UK-based company. For me, it was where I live, but it's a global company with presence right from China all the way to the west coast of the US. We're in healthcare life sciences and specialize in helping biopharma in designing their clinical trials through a mix of software and services. Sitel has been PE owned now for around about 4 years. For myself, prior to Sitel, I spent the last 15 years in a range of different companies and sales leadership roles. And very much looking forward to the discussion today.
Okay, good. Thank you guys for introducing yourself. And as you can hear, we both have participants who work at a PE firm, who work with PE firms, and for PE firms. So we have the whole area covered here. I just have one disclaimer though, because as you can hear, we probably have some different levels in English in today's panel, including myself. So I would like everyone to please bear over with James and Scott. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Let's get started. All right. I think we should start the discussion with, focus on the beginning of a PE life cycle, when the company becomes funded. So Scott, when you as a coach, you work with the newly acquired Portco, what is a quick win in terms of implementing some key sales technologies?
So sales technologies, there's obviously lots of different types of things you can go out there and do. I like to think about how do we make things scalable and reproducible, right? What we really want to try to get to is how do we get our team to be able to be more effective in our go-to-market strategies. And so that's from marketing to sales, and I'll even add customer success and the ability to continue to retain and grow customers. So there's lots of great technologies that are out there, from your CRM system, which is obviously one of the more important ones. I'll let Simon talk about those type of technologies. But there's lots of other great technologies, from helping to understand research, right? The ones that give you contact information or org chart information. I'm trying not to plug anyone's name here because there's lots of different types of vendors that are out there. You also have the kind of conversational intelligence softwares, right, that will record calls, understand calls, help you understand what we could do. A great way to go out there and be able to coach and be able to really see what we do and how we do it without anyone hiding from that type of information. So we can go out there and get better. And there's also some that really help just, create more efficiencies and effectiveness. So if you wanted to do outreach style softwares where you can have different cadences or sequences to go out there and do different types of communications for your BDRs or SDRs, those, people doing the cold calling and reach outs. There's lots of great technologies that are out there. But what it also helps with, it's not just about sales. When you do those call recording type of softwares, that's great for product to hear customer sentiment, right? Or executives or marketing or. So there's these great things of what you can go out there and try to do to make sure it's effective. Now, with anything else, quick wins that you want to try to go out there and get to, you don't just implement technology for the sake of implementing technology. What are the key things we need to go out there and do from a strategic perspective to get to the right results that we want to get to, and what technologies will help us get there? So those are some of the main common types of technologies that I see people do really quick to help with the research, the outreach, and then the conversational intelligence, see how we're actually doing on those types of capabilities that are out there. But I'll let, I guess I'll let Simon talk about some of the other technologies. I know he's itching.
Yeah, because I also thought, talked about all these kind of different sales technologies and how, you obviously collect a lot of data from that, as a company when you start to implement those technologies. So I was also just wondering, Simon, when you have a client, for instance, who have set up, a call solution, they log now contacts, opportunities, activities, how do they actually utilize this data in order to grow their business?
Yeah, and I really want to echo what Scott is saying regarding choose a platform where you can scale from it, because otherwise you are locked down in a system and you cannot scale when your business is scaling. But knowing why, how, and what you're doing is often the key within your data. So you can make some smarter decision when you have the correct data, and it can enhance customer satisfaction and hopefully also increase sales in the future. But sometimes double tap a little bit more on the data and knowing why you succeed or not based on the data you have in your CRM. It often can give you a good explanation to the PE fund why you either succeeding or not. So this can validate some of the argument that you're having for yourself. Furthermore, when you're having all of these data, it is an opportunity for you to coach your sales representative better instead of just looking into the numbers and into the forecasting, but really involved with your people and engage them within how they can optimize their own sales process with all the data that you have collected around your customer, and also all the data you have collected around the way you're using and doing your opportunities as well. So you know exactly what to chase instead of chasing the wrong opportunities with the wrong customers. And then, of course, again, what Scott is saying, it perhaps can enhance your efficiency and have a higher close rate.
Yeah, so it's not just for the individual sales rep, it's also for the company to enable more strategic decision making based on the historical data that you will not capture outside of a commercial platform, if I understand it correct.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, good. And James, I know that you've worked both in companies that has been early and late stage of a private equity life cycle. So when you hear all the things that Simon just said, when you go through a later stage, you should at least have them in place. Like you should have a setup where you collect data and make decisions out of that. But what do you then need to do when you have that setup? Like what are the final things you need to do in a tech setup to prepare yourself for an exit, whether that being a strategic sale to another fund, IPO? Like what are the final touches to that?
Yeah, I think it follows on from the conversation, but it's all about the data, right? And from a sales leader's perspective, there's two fundamental reasons to put in technology. One is it makes the sales team's life easier, or as it will do when it gets adopted. But then the second is the data and what you do with it. And I think from Simon's perspective, understanding what's going on in opportunities and at the deal level is a great first step. But I think as that starts to build and as you get that level of understanding, trying to take that macro level view of some of the key KPIs around your examples like churn rates, how many customers are you bringing on board at the macro level versus how many do you lose? These key performance indicators are what give you that historical view and then the ability to project forward. And it also informs you on areas to make strategic investments. And you can demonstrate and say, well, we can do the analysis to say, well, we're not very strong in this market versus that market, and we can then justify increased headcount. We can justify the investments that we make, because I would argue 99% of PE-backed companies are all about the growth, and growth comes with data and justification as to why we want to spend money here, because we'll get a return on investment. I think that's where when you start to invest in the technology, it gives you the data, but it gives you the proof points to say, look, here's why I want to invest, and here's why we're being successful. All of those things add up to a successful exit at the end.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a comment actually, also because when you're talking a lot about these data and so on, everybody can collect data now and then. It is not. It is a commodity now. So it's how you're using it, so you can differ as a company instead of your competitors. So I think that's the most essence of some of these things as well.
Yeah, and everyone's going to have different questions as well, right? Especially in PE companies, when we've been through a couple of different ownerships, and their viewpoint is different. And especially when you gear up for exit, whether that's IPO or someone's coming to buy it, they're going to ask you different questions. So having as much data as you can to pivot in different directions, and the ability to interrogate your data in different ways, it's an essential requirement for sure.
Perfect. Guys, I'm stopping it right here because we have a lot of interesting subjects today. So that was a bit about technology. We can of course circle around to that in our next two subjects. But I think we should also talk about if we say now we have the setup right, we have the tech setup that we actually need. What is then important for a private equity fund when they make a new investment? And I know, Scott, as we talked about, you worked with a number of PE-backed companies and still do, and you also work with sales optimization at a fund. So can you maybe put a few words on what is expected in terms of building a sales methodology, and is it even expected?
Yeah, so I think sales methodologies, mean different things to different people. I always like to make sure I understand what people mean. So they could have a sales methodology that is, force management style stuff of the medics, med picks, whatever you want to call it. The challenger sale that's out there, Sandler, you can buy us. I have my own as well, right? We have them that's out there. But I think it's not just the sales methodology, it's the process in which we want to go out there and really implement it to be effective. All right, how do we go out there and drive it? And when we talk about things like scalable and reproducible, yes, I totally agree with James. You have that data that helps you look at, here's the starting point and the focus of what we want to go out there and get to. And I like to build those things in by using a sales playbook. And so the way that I define a sales playbook and the way that I build these for my customers is making sure that you have your sales process and your sales methodology and whatever else that's out there that you are wanting to use that incorporates not just how do we, leverage our tools, but what are the sales best practices? So for every stage, what are the actions we take? What are some of the tools or resources that are the best practices, the right emails, the right salesmanship that we really have to build into it? Because it's really about the key actions and how to effectively do that. And there's a myriad of actions that a seller needs to do to really be effective from lead to close. And then I'm not even really referring to expansion and growth and retention, but those are obviously key items that you want to go out there and do. But what you want to make sure is that it's not just a sales thing. This is a company thing, meaning if I'm selling James and he's going to be a client of mine, he's a VP of sales, my target customer, it's not just helping him, but I have to make sure that things that he sells, his team can actually implement, know how to implement. And if we talk about a sales methodology, it really understands the pain and how do we solve those needs, well, we better deliver upon those needs. So our implementation handoff has to be solid. Our ways to be able to go out there and solve and track those needs to turn that into a customer success story that James can then use to track newer customers or get referrals or to get a recommendation or a customer case study or how do we look at the complete lifestyle so it can continue to scale upon itself. And so it's about bringing in a process, a tool like a sales playbook that makes it incredibly effective to use all of your processes and your methodologies and your sales best practices in a fluid manner.
Yeah, agreed. Totally agreed. And you also talked about one thing here that I was thinking a bit about, the adoption to making sure that they don't just have a playbook, they look at it in the intro, and then they start building their own best practice, right? It's the adoption that is really interesting from that perspective, not just the theory. And I was also wondering, Simon, you must also have had clients, targets, that have asked you, okay, we have this methodology. How do we make sure our salespeople use it, like through the technology that you offer? Like, what do your clients ask you, and what do you think is best practice in this instance?
Yeah, I think it's really hard to say what is best practice, because of course it differs from each company and from prospect to prospect. And what I can say regarding, and it doesn't matter which kind of CRM that you're using or which tool that you're using, adoption again here is key, because if you're not using the product, then you will not get anything out of it. But in my experience, I would say having a system where your sales reps feel that they are getting the information that they needed. So they look up in their CRM and really see some value. So it will make their selling so much easier, so they can hit their quota. And I think every sales guy is like, they're aiming to hit their quota, so they need to see some value within their CRM system to hit it. Otherwise, we will do everything else. We will go on PowerPoint, we will do our own presentation things, or have our own stakeholder management. So having a system where you really could have focus on your customer, and you are ensuring that you are getting some value so you can hit your quota. Because often when some of these systems are pulled down through an organization, a lot of sales people just think that this is to make the management happy. Now they can get some target on us. They can see how many call connects that we are doing and so on. So in my opinion, it should be a tool where sales reps can see that they really are closing that quota, hopefully overachieve it, and then they can see some value in the CRM, and that will also drive adoption more and more, because then people will use it.
Yeah, agreed. And I know we have James here, who is actually in the process of implementing a sales methodology, which I kind of waited to hear what you guys said until I asked James. So James, maybe you can put a few words on, from the practical side, from a sales leader, right? Like, what have been the challenges, and what do you expect to gain from it when it's adopted?
And James, I'm not upset that you didn't come to me to help you with the sales methodology.
No, but I will, Scott, I will pick up on, I think the word you started with, sales methodologies in the plural sense, and then you went to name on a few. And I think that's the biggest challenge. There's so many out there, right? Everyone has their own sales methodology. And I think, for me, being pragmatic, there is no one size fits all. And I like what Scott talks about in terms of it's more about a playbook, right? And even with a company like Sitel, one sales methodology or one playbook doesn't work, because we have different business lines that require different things, right? And even within our software business, different products have slightly different variations on that. So finding the right methodology or the right playbook is difficult. And I think, especially in the context of like private equity, when you're likely growing and you're likely hiring new people, when you add new salespeople to an organization, they're going to have different backgrounds, they're going to have different experiences. And a strong team, a strong sales team is supposed to be diverse. Like any team, you don't want all the same person, because then it's not a team. You just have the same people doing the same things, and there's nothing to learn from each other. So with all that in context, when you start to roll something out, for me, the positioning in an organization is key. I completely agree with Scott and Simon, especially around it's an organizational concept. It's not just for the sales team; it's for everyone to think about. But also, it's starting with the basics. Using the sales methodology or the playbook as a guiding principle rather than a set of rules. Not coming in and saying, "Okay, here's something new. Here's how we want you to do it." It's more of a, here's something new that you can leverage and adapt to, the salesperson, right? And I think giving the salespeople the autonomy to say, well, all right, now I've got some new stuff that I can use as a guiding principle, and then taking the time to align people slowly over a period, so that people start to come together and start to use the same framework at least. But certainly coming out of the gate with recognizing that it's going to take time to get there, but delivering it as a guidance document and not a set of rules is definitely the most successful from what I've seen in the past.
Yeah, Definitely, definitely. I think that's also one key takeaway that I've experienced is that sometimes you can take a methodology like MEDIC or MEDPIC that was invented in the 90s, right, and just say that's what we'll use. Okay, but but hasn't things changed since then? Don't we offer different products to different markets? I don't know if any one of you have any thoughts around that.
Well, I did my first sales training about 18 years ago. It was with IBM, and the sales methodology is still the best, and I still use it every day. So I think some of it's timeless because it transitions across like the basics of sales and the basics of go-to-market. But I think it's tweaking that, and I think that's where I'm sure like with the work that Scott does that we didn't commission, but maybe we will in the future. It's about how do you take that and make it relevant to what you're doing. How do you take the basics of whether it's MEDIC or other things and saying, right, how do we take that as a starting point and then tweak it for our specific needs? And then I think when you do that, you have something that's relevant that people can say, oh yeah, okay, that's good for me. It's no longer generic. It's specific to my role,
Yes.
my market, my products.
Yeah, I think that's also a good bridge to our final subject, which is the change management processes. So when we have a sales methodology, or maybe we just have a best practice, right? And we also have some technology. What do we actually need to do in order to implement these changes? I think if you can go off from that, James, to start with as a sales leader, like beyond these subjects we just talked about, what is also relevant in order to make sure we actually hit our KPIs?
Yeah, and I think this is the hardest part. Like putting a methodology in place and buying the technology. Whilst when you start it seems simple. That's dead easy. Then compared to all right, now we've got to use it. And I think for me that as a sales leader, that's the most exciting part. But it does take two things. It takes time and it takes flexibility. And I think in my experience of private equity, the good news is that there is a recognition that it does take time, right? That I'm pretty sure there's no private equity company out there that sees a quick win, a quick return in 3 to 6 months. It just doesn't happen. So you're recognizing that you have the time. It falls to the sales leadership then to drive that forward. And I think most companies or PE companies recognize that they have a broad portfolio and see that every company is slightly different. So the level of adoption, the speed at which you can drive that change, needs to be flexible. It needs to adapt and change as priorities come and go. And I think for me with my teams, it's just keeping that energy high on using the new technology, using the methodologies regularly. Being flexible, knowing when to push and say, right, we should do more of this now, or knowing when, as Jeppe, we've discussed with my team, knowing when to say, well, you know what, we need a couple of months because something else has come along. We have to focus on that. Yeah. When that's out of the way, we'll come back and we'll sort of go back to the methodology, back to the technology, and then start to drive that cadence again. And I think eventually when you keep that focus, what was once new and what was once something that we all had to learn does start to become the standard behavior, and then everyone starts to benefit from that. And I think just recognizing right up front that it will take time and being okay with that for me has been the key to success and key to adoption and key to keeping the sales teams engaged, because ultimately if they're not using it, you don't get the data, you don't get any of the benefits.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what's actually my next question to Simon, based on what you just said, James. Like, how do you make sure, because you don't have 3 to 6 month time frame, but you also don't have 10 years. Like you need to have that within a few years, right? Where you make sure that the things get adopted and you show your KPIs. So how do you actually make sure, from a technology perspective, Simon, with your clients, that the technology you provide actually gets adopted and starts to show some results within quite a small time frame?
Yeah, and actually, I really want to echo what James is saying here, because it's an organizational thing here to get the sales organization to use the system, so they can adopt it, and it really are a prioritization on what to do and what not to do, and get everybody involved, both the most skeptical part, but also the happy campers that are striving for this new change, but really have an open forum here to discuss what is working, what is not working within the system, so everybody can be happy, and then of course make some decision on which way to go. But I really want to echo that everybody should in the organization try to be involved as possible, so you are having different kind of point of view on your sales organization to use the system, because of course there is a sales methodology that you want to put down on it, but sometimes people are using it differently, but we need everybody involved in the same process, so you get the beneficial without of this data as well. So really focus and then get the organization to play a key role here, so there is a good feeling in a project. And I also think that's important, to have a really good feeling about a project, so everybody is happy, because then it will drive even more success moving forward.
Yeah, agreed. And Scott, maybe that's actually a question for you is, you work with newly acquired portcos, right? So what do you see? There must be some sort of change of mindset when you maybe have been a bit bootstrapped and finally get new funds to invest. And how do you manage that to make sure you still deliver on your KPIs?
Yeah. So first thing is, what are the KPIs, right? So I have found that a lot of people don't necessarily know the KPIs, or they have different KPIs. So I always love to standardize, especially at the PE or board level with the executives. So I'm going to give out what I think the main go-to-market KPIs will be, kind of, I'll say in order of how they tend to fall. So first things would be things like number of new MQLs, marketing qualified leads. So it's the marketing funnel coming in. Then you got the conversion rate of those to turn into opportunities. Then you got your close rate of those. So you can see the whole throughput kind of going through that. And with that, you want to make sure that you can measure pipeline. Typically that 3x past the initial stage, right? 3x of people that I've talked to as a seller, defining that type of measurement. So whatever stage it's in there, typically it's your first or second stage with a % of a probability to close. And then you want to look at a couple of key things. One, rep attainment, right? How well are they doing tracking to their goals? But with that, a subcategory I'll say is ramp time for new people. So the best practices that I put out there is how, and working with teams and private equity backed companies, is really focusing on ramp time for the BDR, SDR being after 1 month, they are at full quota. And after AEs, they're at full quota after 4 months. So starting that 5th month, if you will. That's very tough to get to both of those ramp times. It is not easy, especially if you have a 6 to 9 month sales process. How do I get to be there at those types of things? And then the last one I'll say is retention rates / expansion rates, just depending upon your business. Some people do expansion as part of net new sales. Some people do it differently. So those are the main KPIs that are out there. And if you measure it, as we've talked about before, and James mentioned before, if you measure these items, that's what we'll be able to go out there and do. And you can quantify your investment. Yes, I think private equity understands you can't turn something around in 3 months. However, I find private equity works a lot faster than, I'll say, kind of quote unquote corporate America, right? So I don't think you have as much luxury, because they do expect you to move fast. They have very high expectations to do it right. They're willing to support you, at least the private equity companies that I've worked with and continue to work with today. They're willing to support you with that investment, but they want to know, is this the right type of investment? They want to see that plan, that measurement, to make sure that it can't go completely sideways, right? If you're going to double or triple your sales team, we got the money to do that. How do we make sure it's the right thing that we're going to go out there and do, so we can measure that type of growth and have the right infrastructure? And if you don't think you could achieve those measurements, then it helps you prioritize what are the key initiatives we need to do to achieve those, and which ones are the higher priority. Do we need to focus in on top of funnel so we can get leads in, so we can feed our sellers, because sellers are expensive, right? We got to make sure they have some degree of pipeline and fluidity versus just all on their own. And then from there, how do we make sure we have the right product systems, sales methodology, support mechanisms, so that sellers can effectively sell it, and kind of go through those key KPIs. So if you know the KPIs, what measures it, and then you could argue and really prioritize internally what's the right things you want to go out there and do and drive towards to have that leverage success, and where to invest to achieve that success.
Perfect. That it almost sounds simple. I know it's not, but it has absolutely the steps you need to go through in order to prioritize and make sure you hit your objectives. So I know we have been touching some big subjects today on technology, sales methodologies, and change management processes in around 30 minutes now. So please connect to James, Simon, Scott, or myself if you have any additional questions, comments, and please make sure to follow Arpeggio as well, and look for our next LinkedIn Live. So thanks for watching today. Hope you learned something. Talk to you soon.